Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Want to know how to move from being in charge to being in control? Well, stay tuned as we uncover the reason most savers worry about their money in retirement. And surprise, surprise, it's not about the money.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the WorryFree Retirement, with your host, retirement specialist and six-time author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
In a world filled with change and uncertainty, the mantra of our unique worry-free retirement process includes these three objectives: to provide our saver clients with more use of their money, more flexibility with their money, and finally, the feeling of being in control of their money. Yet, what I've found in meeting with savers these past 40 years is this: in the end of life, this life we live and the ways we choose to live it actually have very little to do with money, but more that feeling of being in control of it. You see, I have found that there are two different feelings in life. There's the feeling that we are in charge of what we can do with our lives and our money, and then there's this elusive reality that while we may be in charge of what we do and the outcomes of what we try to do, in many cases, someone else is in control. For instance, let's assume that you are a typical client or someone we are looking to work with in the worry-free retirement process. Maybe you're over the age of 55, possibly already retired, or nearing retirement, and you are definitely what I refer to as the saver personality. That is, someone who is more concerned about the return of your money as opposed to the return on it. In other words, you are that person who has worked your tail off for what you have saved, and now that you are retired or thinking of retiring in the near future, you simply want to use, enjoy, and protect what you have worked so hard to save. But then something happens. You now are forced to trust others with your money. Why? Well, because it has now dawned on you that you really aren't confident in knowing how to take your life savings. Maybe that's your 401k or IRA or that annuity or money in the bank, and how to turn that money into a paycheck that will last as long as you do. That's why for years I've said that retirement is not about budgeting, nor is it about having some magic number out there. No. To be worry-free in retirement, one must understand that all that a saver needs is a better understanding of what I refer to as retirement cash flow. That's the understanding of knowing that what is coming in the front door equals or exceeds what is going out the back door. And surprise, surprise, the only way to monitor your cash flow is by having a written game plan, one that is orchestrated and overseen by retirement planning firms such as Tony Walker Financial. Oh, funny, now for years we've been preaching this message of getting control of your retirement by understanding this concept of cash flow. It appears that the rest of the financial world is agreeing with our process, as evidenced by this latest article from one of the many so-called experts on retirement who is basically saying the same thing. But since most of you have no written game plan, you become the target of a financial world that is in control and, sadly, in charge of what you're going to do with your money. Now, knowing you need help with your retirement, that has led to a plethora of this huge cast of characters all vying for your attention and leading you to believe that you must use their opinions and their products to make retirement happen. And where might you find this cast of characters after your money? Well, there's YouTube, those who invite you to the free steak dinners, the latest trend of financial advisors pretending to be college professors by inviting you to educational workshops on college campuses. And then there's the practice of advisors hosting workshops at, of all places, public libraries. What is up with that? And then finally, one could argue that we in the financial world are marketing our services just like I'm doing now by hosting TV and radio shows. Regardless of how and where you are finding us, the amount of varying opinions and conflicting information about retirement is factually overwhelming. which is why I'll repeat to you what my late great father used to say when I got in a hurry and doing something very important.
Just slow down.
Folks, the ultimate objective of any retirement plan is to give you three things. Again, more use of your money, more flexibility with it, and finally, as a result of all of this, provide you that feeling that you are not just in charge of your money, but now more in control of it. That's what a worry-free retirement looks like. So, how do we help thousands of savers gain more control over their retirement? Well, stay tuned as we share with you the secret sauce of our 5-step process we call the Worry-Free Retirement. I'm Tony Walker. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Wondering how much money you'll need to retire? Probably a lot less than you think. I'm retirement specialist Tony Walker, and for over 40 years I've helped thousands of savers determine when to retire and how much money they'll need in retirement, and I can help you too. To see if you can retire now, take advantage of our free 10-minute fiduciary phone call with me, Tony Walker, by logging on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 877-499-9255. Our Tony in the Trenches comes to us from Sam and Peggy over in Seymour, Indiana, who asked the following. Tony, we recently attended a dinner seminar about estate planning. After the meeting, we met with the presenter, and he suggested we roll our entire 401k into an annuity and then take distributions from the annuity each year to purchase a life insurance policy so that we could use the life insurance for tax-free income and estate planning for nursing homes. Problem is, the life insurance premium is $30,000 a year, and our concern is that we may not be able to afford paying $30,000 a year for life insurance. So is life insurance the best way to plan for a tax-free retirement and protect our estate from nursing homes? You know, I hear this story about large amounts of premiums being put into life insurance. Not that I'm opposed to it, but in many cases it's things like this. Totally inappropriate, and reminds me of the story once of an insurance agent who apparently was meeting with a couple, and after telling them how much life insurance they might need, he responded also with this: if you can afford what you've got, you probably don't have enough. More reason people should get a second opinion before ever dumping their life savings into annuities and thinking life insurance can provide a tax-free retirement income. A lot in that question. Okay, as we think about this modern-day concept of retirement, a time in life when savers are supposed to know how to turn their life savings into a paycheck that's supposed to last as long as they do, let's take a look at what savers are and can be in charge of versus the things that the financial world is actually in control of. Oh, by the way, whenever I refer to the financial world, remember, there's basically 5 entities that are in control of most aspects of the world of finance. You got the banks, insurance companies, the government, big corporations, and finally, Wall Street. These 5 entities, for the most part, control most of the world's money and decisions that will affect our lives. So given this fact, let's start with the things we can help savers do to be in charge of their money. Number 1, how much they should be saving and spending. This is something that you are in charge of, and we can help you think through. Number 2, the decision of when to retire. Talking about the many people who come to me for a plan and think they cannot retire because in most cases, that's right, they're not working with an experienced retirement planner and they have no game plan. We can help you figure that out. Number 3, another thing you can do to be in charge of your money is how and when to give yourself permission to enjoy this money before it's too late. As I often say, the biggest mistake savers meet, and I've got thousands of people I've worked with over the years, is they wait too long to enjoy their money. Number 4, what else can you be in charge of? Well, you can be in charge of where you're going to invest the money and how much of it you want to keep safe. And that decision is oftentimes left to the advisors, and many of these advisors are putting way too much of your money at risk, especially if you're a saver. And then finally, to me, the biggest thing you're in charge of right now is who in the world you're going to trust with your money. Now, let's look at the things that are truly out of our control when it comes to planning for retirement. Number one, what in the world the stock market is going to do in the future. Folks, again, I've stressed this before. If you're a saver and retired or nearing retirement, you've got to look at taking less risk with your money, because who knows, if you're taking money out of those accounts and the market plummets, you're in trouble. Number two, another thing we really cannot control but definitely affects our finances, and that is future interest rates set by the Fed. This affects everything. This controls the rates on annuities, on bank CDs, on inflation, and of course, what it's going to cost you should you decide to borrow money. The number three thing that is totally out of our control is the future tax rates that the government might impose, what might happen to Social Security, Medicare premiums, and as we're finding out as we record this show in May of 2025, even what might happen to Medicaid. Number four, the other issue most people cannot control is family issues. That's right, the uncertainty over health, death, all kinds of things that come up. In fact, I had a fellow the other day that came in completely healthy, and he got a routine shot, here, on his derriere. Unfortunately, the area was not cleaned, and when he got the shot, he got infected, and 6 months later, he finally gets to go back to work. Folks, strange things can happen. Of course, the ultimate, losing a family member, family members in need, a lot of these things that are not anticipated. Again, I run into things like this all the time. Had an adult child who was divorced with her child that recently had to move in with her parents, which are my clients. So again, folks, who knows what the future might hold in terms of family issues. And another thing, finally, you can't control, and that's how long you're going to live, which leads to our philosophy of live well, die broke. This unique philosophy that is borne out with meeting nearly 20,000 savers, a unique philosophy that I call live well, die broke. In fact, I felt so strongly about sharing this life-changing narrative with savers that I wrote a book about it, of course, called Live Well, Die Broke, which can be purchased from any major bookseller. And we have a free offer to get this book. It's an audio version, but you can get the audio version of Live Well, Die Broke by simply logging on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. You're going to scroll down there. You can click on that link and listen to the full audio book absolutely free. Okay, got to take a quick break, but when I return, another interesting Tony in the Trenches, and also how we at Tony Walker Financial help our clients gain more control of their money and retirement. This is the Worry-Free Retirement. We'll be right back. Have you recently retired, been laid off, or offered a buyout? Has the company you work for moved, been acquired, or closed its doors forever? And finally, do you have a 401k with a previous employer you'd like to move to safer territory? Then take advantage of this opportunity to move your 401k or lump sum pension to Tony Walker Financial. Let's meet in person to discuss your retirement options. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com to schedule your free, no obligation appointment. Let us help you today. Our second Tony in the Trenches today comes to us from Dave, who I met in the office yesterday, regarding a second opinion on his retirement and why he came to Tony Walker Financial in the first place. And here his question went something like this. Tony, I have been all over YouTube watching countless videos in search of answers on how to save on taxes on my 401k in retirement, but all I'm getting is conflicting advice from all of these so-called experts. Why are there so many conflicting opinions on retirement planning, and who am I to believe when it comes to my retirement? In the last segment of this show, I noted that these 5 institutions control most of the money, yet interesting that this article revealed that in the good old US of A, 19 households control $2.6 trillion of the U.S. economy. Let me repeat that. 19 wealthy folks out there in the US of A control nearly 2% of our nation's wealth. Now, that is really crazy when you think about it. In fact, it reminds me of that old self-fulfilling prophecy of the old riddle about money and who gets it in the end that goes something like this. What if all the world's wealth was evenly distributed to all the world's people? How long would it take for all the world's wealth to end back up in the hands of just a few people? So, what does all of this control in the hands of a few people have to do with the lack of control you feel with your money and possibly even your retirement? Well, the key is to focus on things that you can be in charge of, and as a result, when you do this, I assure you, you're going to start feeling like you're in more control of your future. Unfortunately, the financial world is not going to help you with this process. That's where we at Tony Walker Financial come into the picture. Our mission in helping savers begins with first getting your finances organized, making sure you have an understanding of what we refer to as retirement cash flow, and then putting in place that unique written game plan so that you can know how much you can comfortably spend in retirement and also be assured that one day you're not going to run out of money. So if that's how you're feeling right now, that you have no control over your money and how best to use and enjoy and protect it during this thing called retirement, we need to talk. And we've made this so easy to do. And best of all, there's no obligation whatsoever. We call it the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call. So to take advantage of talking to me, Tony Walker, the owner of the company, at no cost or obligation, just log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. That's TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Click on that Let's Get Started. Or if the internet's not your thing, you can call us 24/7. We have operators standing by to take your call. That number, 877-499-9255. Folks, when you hear of all these strategies of moving money around and nobody really talking about the what-ifs and the costs, you've got to be working with somebody experienced that's done this a long time. I've seen about every strategy out there, and I'm going to show you how this one particular strategy, again, what happens when this thing falls apart, and it will. Now, in this example, these folks had about a $500,000 401k plan, and what they were told to do by this agent was to move the entire $500,000 into an annuity. And they were told this was actually a fixed indexed annuity that this agent was proposing, that it should make 6% on a regular basis. Now, folks, fixed indexed annuities have never averaged 6%. You can't assume that. In fact, we never assume more than 3%, but that's what they were assuming. And then the actual return, let's say maybe it was 3, you're going to see what happens here. So this assumes if you put all the money in a fixed indexed annuity, well, you can't take out but 10% penalty free. So if $500,000, but you had to net, it was let's say the life insurance, I'll put that down here. The premium was going to be $30,000 per year. The agent told them that it should, based on dividends and returns, be able to be what's called paid up in 6 years, which you would never tell somebody that. Again, folks, they're making assumptions that probably aren't going to happen. This is happening now with indexed universal life. People are assuming 8, 9, 10%, and then building the strategy around these assumptions. Really, really scary planning stuff. I would never do something like this. But anyway, so the idea was, hey, you got a $500,000 in an annuity, you're going to make 6% on it. You should easily be able to pull out $30,000, which they forgot to tell them you're going to have to pay taxes first. So really, you're going to have to take out about $45,000 a year. Why is that? Because that $45,000 coming out, obviously, you're going to have to pay Uncle Sam. Remember, folks, this is pre-tax money. So the $30,000 life insurance policy really costs, depending on the tax bracket, around $40,000 to $45,000. So if you can envision this bucket being drained, if you don't make the 6%, it'll eventually run out of money trying to fund the life insurance. And if the life insurance was supposed to be paid up in 6 years, which it will not, actually I did meet with these people and they showed me all these illustrations. This is going to be a nightmare if they pursue this. If you run it on more conservative illustrations, that life insurance won't be, quote, paid up until approximately 12 years. So in other words, if you planned on using some of this money to supplement retirement and you had to pay $45,000 for 12 years, depending on how the annuity returned, again, the annuity may run out of money. You're still trying to pay for the life insurance. Plus, when you start pulling cash value out and trying to send that to your checking, that's where they call this tax-free retirement. In fact, there's a book written about this, really dangerous book called Tax-Free Retirement or something to that effect. Again, it's making these assumptions that you can pull out all this money in retirement tax-free, which in theory, it could work. The problem is you're going to have to make bold assumptions and meet those assumptions in the future. Again, something a fiduciary should never be recommending based on those kind of assumptions. So what's the end result here with this strategy? First of all the money now is tied up in the annuity. obligated to paying life insurance premiums that we don't know when they're going to end. That's based on the rates of return. And then as you pull money out of the life insurance, in most cases, a lot of agents recommend borrowing the money out because it's tax-free, but you have to remember that there's a loan occurring in the life insurance when you borrow it to get it out for income. So somebody's got to pay that loan back, and potentially it might be you. That's right. If you're borrowing money from a life insurance policy and it gets below a certain basis, you're going to either have to pay more premium in, or there's what's called a phantom tax that can occur. Folks, I've been working with life insurance for years. These are great products, but you have to be very, very careful in who's presenting them to you. So maybe that's you right now. Whether it's an annuity or life insurance or both, please, before you rush into something like this, why don't you get a second opinion from myself at Tony Walker Financial? There's no obligation. We'll be happy to look at the strategy they're recommending. We can put it to the test and make sure it holds up over the future and make sure these assumptions are not wacky, which is what I'm seeing in most cases. So to take advantage of a second opinion on anything regarding your finances, just log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com, click on that Let's Get Started, or call us anytime at 877-499-9255. We'll be right back. Don't let the fear of running out of money in retirement keep you up at night. Turn your 401k into mailbox money for life by logging on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 877-499-9255. Our client spotlight today features Mr. Garrett Bates and Miss Melody Bates. And Bates, it's so good to have you with us, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tony.
It's an honor.
So first of all, tell us a little bit about what you did for a living. We'll start with you, Garrett.
Oh, I was did the corporate grind for 25 years in the healthcare industry and focused on helping the organization run more effectively.
And then yourself, Melanie.
I'm an artist professionally. I do commission portraits.
Wow. And I understand you had a very big honor. Tell us who you were recently commissioned to do a portrait of.
Oh, well, I was honored to be chosen to paint the official portrait of Governor Beshear.
And that is a beautiful portrait. It's something else. You've got to be proud of that.
Thank you. It was actually a dream of mine to paint a Kentucky governor, and couldn't have picked a better governor to be able to paint.
Can't believe the talent. I'm so impressed. Tell us a little bit about the experience in working with the staff. I'm very proud of the staff and just how we run things here and the operation in general.
That level of quality service and just personal relationship has been, really part of the whole experience for these last really 9 years.
To walk into your office talking about finances, it's more than that. I wanted to share something that was really special that was going on in my life with you at the time. And you're a finance guy, but you're also developed that relationship. You've asked, you always ask us, what are we doing? And what's up in life? And, it's just, that's
Well, you make sure that the financial things match up to the things that we're trying to do.
Looking for an advisor you can trust? Schedule your free phone call with Tony at TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 1-877-499-9255.
Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement with the money missionary himself, Tony Walker.
When thinking of what you and I can be in charge of, that would be the things we can see, versus what might still be out of our control, which might be considered the things we know are at play but we cannot see, I would be remiss if I did not remind those of us who call ourselves Christians that we are living in two diametrically opposed worlds. First, there is that person or entity who oversees the world's ways versus the one who, regardless of who might be in charge, is the one who will make it happen in the end. If you're like me and rely on Scripture to answer such weighty questions, you will discover that the one in charge of the world's affairs is not God, but actually the devil. For proof of this fact, note in Matthew chapter 4, beginning in verse 8, where the devil takes Jesus to the top of the mountain and shares with him the prospects of giving the world to Jesus. More proof that the devil oversees the world's ways. And then look at how Peter describes the devil's motives, where in 1 Peter 5:8, he says that the devil is like a lion prowling around looking to devour us. Sounds pretty gloom and doom until you look further at who is ultimately in control of our very souls, and that's God. We see where in Psalm 62:7, David reminds us of who is in control by reminding us where our hope and our salvation lies. Then we turn over to a Hebrews 11:1, verses 1 through 3, and it reveals our hope and our ultimate salvation is not seen nor discovered in this world, but is rather cast upon the faith of what is not seen, that being the promises of God. So how do we cope with the world that oversees what might happen while at the same time being rooted in this fact that it is God who ultimately is in control? It's rooted in our attitude. That's right. In fact, as the great preacher and pastor Chuck Swindoll would argue, attitude and how we react to the circumstances of what we see around us is 90% of life. In fact, here's what Mr. Swindoll would have to say about this condition of attitude. In fact, let me read it to you right now. Mr. Swindoll says, "The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think, say, or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, and a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% of what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes," to which I would say, amen. Well, speaking of attitude, I've got a question for those of you who are feeling out of control when it comes to your attitude about retirement and all the mixed messages you're receiving from a financial world looking to control it. Just slow down and let's talk. That's right. You and I talk for a few minutes by phone to see if we can be of help to you. And we made this so easy to do, and best of all, it's free and comes to you with no obligation whatsoever. In fact, we call it the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call, where you and I will talk for a few minutes to see if we can be of help. Now, to take advantage of this free offer, just log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. There's a little red button you're going to click on, and our offices will arrange this phone call. Then, after the phone call, if it merits and if we think we can help, guess what? We're going to meet in person. That's right. You and I, the owner of the company, someone who's worked on nearly 5,000 written game plans to lay out a free game plan for you. So take advantage of this free offer at TonyWalkerFinancial.com, or if the internet's not your thing, call us anytime at 877-499-9255. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. We hope you have enjoyed it, but you remember, between now and next week, if all else fails, you be worry-free and you make it a good one.